Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is Sunday, August the 27th, and I am going to give it a few minutes, as I do, to give folks time to join. Got some thumbs up. Happy Sunday. Another thumbs up. Happy Sunday. Thank you for joining. I am giving it a few minutes to see if we have some more folks enter the chat, and then I'll get started. Key, welcome. Good afternoon. Glad you were able to join. Good day. Good day to you. Thank you for joining. Judith, welcome. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining. Hope you are well. All right, I'm going to get it started. It is a beautiful Sunday here. I am going to do my intro and then we'll get started. So this is our part of the segment that I do on Sundays. And this morning we will be in community. So good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jewel Pearson. This is Miss Bohemian Soul TV, Creating Home, a tiny house series. And the segment that we are going to kick off is the What's Your Question? And every Sunday I try to offer live content every Sunday. I'm not always making it, but I try. So live content where I alternate between these conversations and where we're in conversation with someone in or around the tiny house movement in our conversations on intimate spaces. And as I introduce myself, I like to say that I built a kind of fancy tiny house in 2015. And since that time, I have shared my journey to hopefully inspire others who are interested in the movement. I do offer coaching and consultations to help others in their journey, and you'll be able to find links to schedule with me in the video description once this goes live. And as I'm doing all of that, I try to serve up a lot of representation along the way because I want us to see ourselves in this movement and know that we are a part of the movement and be able to have conversation around the things that are specific to our journey in the movement. It is my intent to build figurative and literal community that is inclusive and accessible. And if you find this information in the video helpful, I hope that you will like it, you'll share it, you'll subscribe to the channel, and then also turn on the notifications so that you'll know when content is available. All right, that is my intro. Good afternoon, Rosalind. Thank you, Key. So this is our What's Your Question on Sunday has kind of turned into more of a community conversation where I am, hello Rachel, welcome, where I am trying to answer questions that come in the chat. I feel like I've covered all the things I kind of know to cover in some of the previous What's Your Questions, but I'm always happy to answer questions and then remind of things that we've talked about before. And so the reminder that I have today, before I just kind of open it up to general conversation, is around due diligence. I had a meeting earlier this week with someone in the community, and I'm helping her navigate some things within the community, in her journey. Hello. And just want to remind everyone, as you are, whatever it is that you're doing, as far as you're as in this movement, and even just overall in life, as you're doing your due diligence and you're trying to find out all of your information, as much as possible, try to get things in writing, so that you have the paper trails, names, dates of conversations that you've had. Because one of the things that you'll find is, people change jobs, people leave, people don't necessarily remember the things that they've said before or they've agreed to before. Sometimes it's not intentional, sometimes it is intentional. So you want to be sure that as you're doing the due diligence, as much as possible, follow up with emails. Even if you have a phone conversation, with someone, follow up with an email after that conversation to say, hey, this is my understanding of what we talked about, and outline everything that you feel like you understood from that conversation. So again, you have that paper trail. And it is important, especially within this tiny house journey, because oftentimes people are um, making it up along the way. And when I say that, I'm not meaning it necessarily in a negative way, but they don't already have rules in place around tiny houses. And so this is a new space for people sometimes. And as they're trying to, maybe they are agreeable to allowing a tiny house, or they're agreeable to a land purchase and allowing a tiny house, all of those things, as they are working with you, they may be coming up with ideas and plans and things that they'll allow you to do, in a conversation, and it's nowhere in it doesn't exist already in writing. So a reminder to, document as much as you possibly can, meeting notes, emails, sharing with the people, copying people, so that everybody's on the same page. Everybody that was in the meeting, copy them on the email, so that everybody is on the same page regarding what was discussed, what was agreed to, what was not agreed to, what you said you were going to do, the details that you shared, all of those things, so that you're covering yourself, and make sure that you're doing your due diligence, so that you are confirming all of the things before you make some moves that may end up being expensive, or not maybe the direction that you should be going in, to allow yourself to make the best decisions for you. Make sure that you're documenting it and doing the research and asking all of the questions. And then, not necessarily to plug what I do, but if there's a space that you're not sure of, reach out to someone that can assist you. And I'm always offering my services. Or, for the free side, refer back to some of the what's your questions, the segments that we've hosted here before. And I try to title them as to, obviously, what we've talked about. And then some of the questions that people are asking that we discuss along the way may be some of the same, questions and part of the journey that you're following. So refer to that as the free stuff. And then, I'm always happy to offer a chat. I do offer chats, quick chats. I offer, in-depth consultations, one-on-one consultations. Um, and those are obviously other things that cost, but I do, try to give to the community here, just to make sure that, you are covered in what you're trying to do. This is, often a difficult space to navigate, like I was saying, because the rules aren't already in existence. And you want to go in with as much information as you possibly can to serve yourself, in the best way possible. So that is really, and I'm pretty sure, I need to look it up, but I know I've done. I'm not saying I know I've done a segment on researching and the questions to ask, and, how to go about it, those conversations, not necessarily showing your whole hand as you're, initially navigating the space. Um, you don't have to tell all of your details, just gather information. And then when you're ready to tell your details, then you can share that information. But you don't want to show your hand until, you are in a place to be because you don't, the right place to be because you don't want, the answer to immediately be no. And then you've given all your information and kind of shut yourself down. So the due diligence and protecting yourself in the process is really important. So that is what I have to share with you all today. Good afternoon. Welcome. I see some new names. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining. Teresa, welcome, welcome. Teresa says she was having technical issues. Well, we're glad you figured it out. Good morning, Keisha. Our last week's guest is in the chat this morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here. If you all haven't watched that segment, it was a great segment with the Mellors, and it was last week's conversation, and I appreciated them being here to share about the work that they're doing, the ADUs, and their progress, and just how they got there. It wasn't, as we always talk about, it's not necessarily about the building of the structures, but kind of the journey and about the people, and that conversation was fabulous. So be sure to watch that replay if you haven't, and I will share the link. Y'all know I have to make notes. I'll share the link to that segment in the video description as well. Good afternoon. Teresa is asking, will you be having any live events in the near future near our great city, or can you share any details of an event near our state? And Teresa, are you in North Carolina? Which great state, what great city are you speaking of? Oh, absolutely, Keisha. It was my pleasure. Um, Tell me, Teresa, I've forgotten where you are. Hey, Robert. Good morning. Good afternoon. I am, I am not hosting any events right now. This is probably the third time I've been asked about an event, and people have asked about meetups. So maybe that's the universe telling me I need to schedule some events or at least some meetups. So I've written that down for the third time. Um, I am working with a board member for Tiny House Big. Don't. I'm terrible. Let me look it up before I tell a lie and mess up the name. Tiny House Big Movement. That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. So this is going to be there an event in the Concord area next year, and we're working on the planning. Concord is considering tiny houses as ADUs. And so the event is not necessarily relative to tiny houses on wheels. Teresa, I didn't know you were in Charlotte. Very cool. We need to connect. It's not necessarily related to tiny houses on wheels, but they are hosting an event and there will be tiny houses there. There'll be speakers, and it's going to be a big event. So we're working on the planning of that, but that won't be until next year. And I am kind of out of the loop for events. I kind of have removed myself from following a lot of the events that I didn't feel like were doing the work to be inclusive. And when I say inclusive, I don't mean inclusive for attendees at the event. I mean inclusive for their speakers and also the discussion. And that's important, where I've asked to be inclusive so that the speakers are also diverse in the session topic. So not just talking about a tiny house build and the aesthetics, but also talking about the concerns that um, Black people and people of color, the global majority, are going to need to be aware of. Parking locations and traveling, like we've talked about, being located in RV parks and just even being safe on the road. And that becomes more and more of a concern for us, unfortunately. And I feel like my counterparts that are hosting events have a responsibility to be sure that those are conversations that are had. And um, I received pushback on that. I've actually been uninvited to spaces. So I removed myself from following a lot of the events. If they're not diverse and inclusive, then I ain't trying to do it. So sorry, I can't tell you of other events. If I find out something that I feel like is worthy of a share, I'll absolutely share it. And until then, I will make it my business to schedule some meetups, travel to some areas and schedule some meetups. So you all might want to tell me where I need to come um, for some meetups and where to schedule. And y'all gonna have to show up too. That's the other thing. Don't have me scheduling a meetup and nobody shows up. And then the event that I'm on the board for, the Tiny House Big Movement event, I'll be sharing some more information about that in the planning as it moves forward. Um, Teresa, thank you very much. I don't know how I didn't know that you were in Charlotte. I'm slow on the uptake, so we have to connect. I'm getting ready to travel this next week, but um, we will connect. Winter is blue. I follow Winter is Blue, a van lifer. He has shared your same concerns. Absolutely. It is a major concern. I don't know if you all have followed the news, but there was an incident that, and I don't want to minimize it by saying an incident, but something that happened yesterday in Jacksonville, Florida, where three Black people lost their life shopping in Dollar General, and I think the murderer was 21 years old, 22 years old, and it was known that he hated Black people, and that was his intent to kill Black people. He had actually been on a campus of an HBCU, and I think that someone turned him away from the campus, and he killed three people in the Dollar General. Three people who just were minding their business in the Dollar General shopping. And so I, I had this conversation with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about his daughter who is heading into her senior year of college. And yeah, it was absolutely horrible. And the challenges of how we were talking about how time moves so fast, and before you know it your kids are grown, and how it's a scary place because as a parent you always want to protect them and kind of keep them under your wing, and then as they're graduating college and they're going off into the world, you kind of have to let go, and how scary that is. And I shared an incident that had happened. It was a racist incident that happened to my daughter when she was probably about 6 or 7 on the playground, and a little boy had called her the N word. He called her a four-eyed N word, and she came crying. She came running home crying. She was more upset about. She wore glasses, and she was more upset about the four-eyed piece. She didn't understand the other piece. And I remember handling that with the little boy and handling it with his parents. And I remember thinking at that time that it, I remember just thinking that that wasn't going to have to deal with that very long. Like things were going to change, and my daughter would not have to deal with that as an adult. And my daughter is now 36, so that's been 30 years ago, and things are to the point where we had what happened yesterday. And so I we were talking about how far removed we are from things actually feeling like they're improving. Where and I thought about what happened yesterday because the rural area that I live in, the two options for shopping are a Dollar General and a Family Dollar. And just imagining going, I would run into the Dollar General because y'all know it's 10 million feral cats out here, and I feed them, and That's where I get their cat food because I'm not paying a lot of money for their cat food. But just minding your business, going to Dollar General and then losing your life, or a family member running to Dollar General for something and never coming back, and it happening because of the color of their skin. So that is the conversation that has to happen, and it just floors me. Yeah, Rosalind, I was uninvited to some events. I was told that my languaging and my tone is too harsh, and that I've had a time with some of these folks. I do a lot of work with Dominique. Oh, and I need to have Dominique on here. Now that would be that I need to reach out to her. That's going to be a blessing for y'all. But Dominique Moody, and I've spoken about her and need to share her home here and have her here. She's in Cali, and Dominique is really she's fire. She's soft spoken, and we have a lot of conversation. And I was told that I needed to be more what's the word? Um, I don't know. Dominique is just like more mild mannered, and I was told that I needed to be more mild mannered. And someone actually said that as I'm speaking about diversity and racism and inclusion, someone said that I was more Malcolm X and where Dominique was more Martin Luther King. And I think that was supposed to be an insult because not everyone valued Malcolm X, or they saw Malcolm X as a radical. And well, they didn't value either one of them during those times. But as they have now, in hindsight, fallen in love with Martin Luther King and quote his quotes and do all of those things, they still can't get with Malcolm X for the most part. So I think that was supposed to insult me when someone told me I needed to be more Martin instead of Malcolm. Obviously, it didn't. Both of them were very valuable leaders, and their voices were needed, and people who know and pay attention know that Martin was moving more towards less nonviolent and more towards radical change, which has been said probably led to the end result because he was changing from his thoughts of 100% nonviolence. So anyway, I've had a time with these folks, and yes, I've been uninvited, and I have called it out. Casey is saying, I went to a tiny home festival in a town an hour outside of Atlanta in June, and trust and believe I looked up that area before heading there. It ended up being fine. So I'm sure I know of the area that you speak of. It was probably my very first tiny house event that I spoke at in 2015 or 2016. It is an hour outside of Georgia. I mean, outside of Atlanta. And my concern as I hustled my way down there, as I got deeper and deeper into the location, I was passing Confederate flags and I was deep in the woods. And I then realized, Jewel, nobody knows where you are. I hadn't told anybody where I was going. And so I stopped and I called a friend and I was like, hey, this is where I am, because I didn't feel comfortable in that area. So I know exactly where you're talking about and whose event that is. And that's one of the people I actually had trouble with years later in Florida, because we were in Florida at an event, St. Augustine, out right outside St. Augustine, and that was the year that I stopped at a store. I was a speaker, stopped at a store in the area before going to speak at the event, and the man there in the store made it clear to me that I wasn't welcome in the area, and I left the area as a result. And so and I had problems with the event host because as I left the event, I let them know I didn't feel safe. I was there in an area by myself, and and the interesting thing is, people who lived in that area that were involved with the event said, "Oh yeah, we know who that is," and people avoid his store. People in the area avoid his store. Well, they didn't tell me that as a traveler in the area. So if I had known to avoid the store, I would have avoided the store. And that was one of the things that I called out to the event owner. And there was also someone else who had a black man who had a problem on site at the event. He had on a dashiki, and a man walked up to him and grabbed his dashiki and pulled it and asked him what he had on, or why he had that on, something like that. And so when we're in areas where we're not welcome, those are the kinds of things, even if the event feels like it is a welcoming event, if the area surrounding the event is not welcoming, then that's something that is, in my opinion, also a responsibility of the event host to be aware of, and to make people aware of, and to have people on site. I've said you need security on site to be aware that we need to be in safe spaces. And because things continue to happen, like what happened yesterday in Jacksonville, we need to, there has to be an awareness for safety, because you never know when people among us are not happy with us, or relative to our skin color. So they don't want to have those conversations, and until they are open to having those conversations, then I can't. Yeah, Madison. That's exactly what I was talking about. Madison, and the event owners who is who I had a problem with. But until they are open to having these conversations, um, and do something about it, then I can't be bothered, because at the beginning and end, middle of every day, I have to be concerned for my safety as a Black woman. I have to be concerned for the safety of this community, because I feel like this is the responsibility that I have, to ensure that we are aware and safe in this movement. Robert is on this morning. Yes, Robert, I have a daughter that is 36 years old. And thank you very much. You get some points today. Um, thank you. Um, Please don't be mild. I am so tired of having to hold my opinion. I refuse to be mild. Um, I refuse. Oh, that's what they told me. I needed to tone it down. They also told me I had a black heart, because I wanted to talk about these things. So when you see my post, I always use a black heart, and I started using a black heart. I got an anonymous threatening email is what happened as I was pushing these things, and I think I got that email in 2017. um, no name. And I had a friend who worked in IT, and he tried to trace it for me, but he never was able to trace it. But the language and the languaging and the verbiage that was used, and the reference to people in and around the movement, I kind of had an idea of who sent the email. But the email basically said that they were watching me and they were going to come for me, and that I was divisive to the movement, because I wanted people to address um, that I was crucifying white people. Um, that I and it summed it up with saying I had a black heart. I was um, an evil person. And I had a black heart because I wanted to focus on these things. And so I've used a black heart in everything I post since that time, because um, it represents something where I know I am doing the right thing. I don't have a black heart. I know that this conversation is important. The conversation, what happened yesterday in Jacksonville, Florida, proves exactly what I say all the time. There is an issue of safety for us in this country, and it can happen at a Dollar General. It can happen in a church. We've seen it happen in a grocery store. We've seen it happen in events. Historically, it has happened. It can happen anywhere. And if people can't recognize that because it's not their journey, then that's not my problem. But it is for me to call it out, because that's my journey. That's the way I have to move. And I've said to you all, I live in a very rural area, and there are certain areas in that area that I don't go into at nighttime. There's a back road that's a shortcut to to other areas within Charlotte, and I'll only go that back road during the daytime. At nighttime, I refuse because I don't want to have car trouble. I don't want to run into something I don't need to run into, so I take the main roads during the daytime. And so that is something that I have to think about, that others get in their car and they don't have to think about. And so it is part of everyday living as a Black person, a person of color. And it's a conversation that I'm going to continue having, and I refuse to be mild. Refuse to be mild about it. We need to have a Black Tiny Home Festival. Well, we would still allow others to come. I don't want to say they can't come. It would be inclusive, but it would be organized within the vein of we're talking about subjects that um, are important to us, and it's going to happen. There was another young lady who was trying to organize a festival, and I know she's canceled it. I have some feelers out on trying to host something within DC that an event space there that's on the radar. And then this event that I'm on the board for, it won't be a Black Tiny House Festival, but it will be a lot of representation because I'm participating in it, and that's important. And many of the people involved and on the board are also Black. So it's coming. And again, not saying it's not inclusive to everybody, but where we can be centered and talk about the things that we absolutely need to talk about. Um, Never be who you are. Don't let anyone steal your joy or disrupt your peace. Absolutely not. That is one of the things that I am focused on. The older I get, I keep saying, if not now, when? And so now it's got to be now. And Casey, I see your hashtag and I love it. Um, Clyde is saying, I haven't seen any improvements on inequality for us. I'm grateful that you are advocating for us. This was a major concern for me. Absolutely. The system is working as by design, and the sooner we recognize that, the better off we are. And we have to work in ways that work for us and be successful within a system that wasn't designed for us. And that is why I talk so much about tiny houses and talk about the fact that year after year, for conventional home ownership, we remain last on those numbers for achieving home ownership. So we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And so we have to think differently. Yeah, that's it. Georgia Tiny Home Festival is the name of it. Absolutely, that is the event, and it was held 1 year. It was held in right outside St. Augustine, Florida, and the event owner and I fell right on out because when I messaged him, I had the experience at the store that was disturbing, and it actually reduced me to tears because I wanted to knock that man out. And then I was frustrated that this was happening in broad daylight in the area. And I only went in the store to get some water. It was the raggediest, poorest looking store I ever wanted to see. I would have not bought anything else out of there but bottled water. And the man, of course, waited to be nasty to me after I had used my credit card to pay for my water. And I actually paid for my water and someone else's stuff because he had a minimum requirement. So I paid for my stuff. He waited for me to pay for my stuff, and then he said what he said. And when I'm sad, when I'm happy, I cry. And I was so angry, and I wanted to knock his head off. And then I recognized that I had come to an area and not done my due diligence to ensure my safety in that area. And I was alone. And then I started paying attention, and there were all of the signs out there in the traffic that I was not in an area that I should have been in by myself. And so I went on site to the festival, and I looked for the festival manager. And I'd already said prior to going that the communication wasn't being done well. They just had this chat that was ongoing, and I didn't have any contact information, none of that. And I'd already called that out. Again, my background has been in event management. And so I called it out that there were some things lacking. I went on site to try to find the event manager. I could not, I think I was on site maybe 30, 45 minutes. Could not find him to connect with him. And they were running behind. And so I told someone else that was associated with the event to let him know that I was leaving. I did not feel safe in the area and I was leaving. In my mind, we weren't getting paid to speak. So I had driven down on my own dime to participate in this event. And I felt like they were behind, like they were the sessions were running over, and so they were at least an hour or more over. So I felt like me not speaking would also allow them time to get caught up on their session, and so I felt like I had done my due diligence. I looked for him and I sent him a message on Facebook to say, "Hey, I'm leaving. I don't feel safe in the area." And he came back with the fact that people were waiting for me to speak and it was unprofessional for me to have left the event. And he said some other stuff. And I said, it is with much privilege that you would think that I should remain in an area to speak to people who are waiting for me to speak. I'm not getting paid for one. So it's not like I volunteered to do this. I drove down on my dime, so I'm not getting paid to do this. And I have chosen my safety over speaking to people about tiny houses. And I said, and it is with much privilege that you would assume that I should remain in an area to speak to your attendees when I'm telling you that I did not feel safe in the area. And I said, as a white man, you've most likely never felt unsafe in the area and don't know what that experience looks like. And it is with much privilege that you would expect that I'd remain there to speak to the audience. And I said, and that's like modern day Stephen infection. And I'm not getting ready to get down like that. And so we had a very public disagreement. And he tried to say that I was unprofessional because I had left. And and that was the end of that conversation. But not too long after that, it started going down because people felt like I was being too vocal. Um, yeah, Teresa, it's serious, and it is scary. And people who don't have to exist in this, just really don't understand what it is. Um, Yes, they were both very, very valuable. Martin Luther King and Malcolm, they both were necessary for the movement. And you're right, Martin was harsh and radical in some points. So, absolutely. Um, Teresa is saying what you're discussing is one of the reasons why I haven't started my tiny journey yet. What I hope to do here as I share my journey, it is not to dissuade people, Black people, people of color from being in the movement. It is to um, sh- shed light on the fact that it isn't all um, cut out like it appears to be on some of the other channels. But it is the same. I feel like the challenges that I have in this journey are so many of the challenges that we have overall in life. So it's really not any different. It's just an awareness that we have to have, and it is and going into it with this awareness helps us set ourselves up successfully. And it is so much of knowing it up front so that you can deal with it and be better prepared on the back end. So I don't want to scare you. I've been in my house for 8.5 years, almost 8.5 years now. I've had some run-ins. I share as I've had run-ins. I've had to move my house because of racism twice. I just shared that event. I've had some run-ins. I'm constantly um, fielding nasty messages and comments on the work that I do here on YouTube, as people call me a racist, or they t- say different things. Like it's always that, but I don't think it would be any different on any other subject. Um, because people who don't experience racism are quick to call out people who are talking about racism as the racist, or to tell me if I stopped talking about it, it wouldn't happen, which is the absolute dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Um, but we can be here, and we can be here safely, and we can support each other in this effort to be here, and that is what I want to do, all the time. Absolutely, Black Lives Matter, and that is so important. um, Robert is saying we shouldn't allow the N word to have such power. The enemy knows how to use the N word on the sensitive person to use the courts against them. Learn more about how the enemy works instead. I agree with that. Um, I agree with that. So I agree with that so much. And I would say it doesn't have power over me, but I'm also not going to allow somebody to disrespect me. And therein lies the challenge. And but I do agree with it. Like, I know I'm not the N word, and I know how the N word is used within our community, and I know how it's used when people try to use it as a weapon. I recognize all people outside of our community try to use it as a weapon against us, but I'm also not going to allow someone to disrespect me. And so, again, therein lies my challenge, in managing that. But I agree so much. Um, Key is saying it's hard for people who do not walk in our shoes to understand our plight. Absolutely. They cannot fathom that we're not making this stuff up. What we must put up with is so far removed from their reality. Absolutely. And the thing that confuses me is, as we talk about our experience and what happens, and then you have things happen like what happened in Jacksonville. Like, I keep wondering, they think that's just an anomaly, that it just happened, or can they not put one and one together and get two to say this is what they're talking about is the reality of racism, and this is how it manifests itself when it goes to that massive level, that highest point, that a 21-year-old, a 22-year-old would go kill three people because he hates black people. Like, he's 21 years old. So this is new stuff. I mean, he's not even some of the old races that have been racist since the break of dawn. This is a new racist. And so this is the stuff that we talk about that happens. And so I can't understand, even if with it being so far from their reality, like, put one and one together and get two and realize this is what the hell we're talking about. Um, yeah, absolutely. So Rachel is saying Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign it was the largest gathering of working poor people. Affordable housing was a major issue. A tent city, National Mall, 1968. Absolutely. Don't grow weary in doing good work. Thank you. I'm not. I'm not. I refuse. It gets tiring. It gets tiring because it's who wants to continue having this uphill battle? But it's the work that I feel like I'm called to do. And so and the community and the conversations and you all's encouragement and to keep me going is what keeps me going. So I appreciate you all. And Teresa, yes, it can happen. This happens in church. This happens in grocery stores. This happens in Dollar General. This happens at events. This happens. It happens, and it's tiring. Um, Casey is saying she thinks they do understand. They just want to feign ignorance, and I would agree with that. Um, okay, see, Goddess is saying the news that some of these shootings are fake. Okay, all right, all righty. No, they don't know our journey. Absolutely not. When I visit my white friend from my HBCU in West Virginia near the Beckley area, she says to let her drive while I'm there. Absolutely. I have a story very similar to that when um, in Georgia, living in Atlanta. I had a coworker, Paige, and her husband's name was Bubba. Well, his nickname was Bubba. And Paige and I were very good friends, and they lived in, oh my God, I can't think of I'm gonna have to Google it because it's gonna bother me. An area in Georgia. Oprah went there in the 90s. Um, oh my, what's the county? It'll come to me. Um, anyway, it's gonna come to me. I'm gonna Google it and try to figure it out. But they lived in Forsyth County. That's it. Thank you, Google. Forsyth County. They lived in Forsyth County. And in the 90s, when I lived in um, Georgia, Forsyth County had a very active Klan community, or they were just maybe going into non-activity, but they have been very active in Forsyth County, and Black people did not live in Forsyth County. And I don't know if you all remember, there was like a big chicken processing thing in that area, and Oprah in the 90s went to Forsyth County, and they had a big protest. They didn't want her there. There was a lot of stuff. But my friend Paige and her husband lived in Forsyth County, and one time they invited me to their house, and they were very clear that I couldn't stay as it got dark. I They were paying attention. I was paying attention, obviously. And as I left, her husband followed me out of the area to make sure that I got out safely. And the thing about it was, one of the things that they talked about was how that they knew it was friends and relatives that were involved in some of the stuff that went on in the area, and how disappointing it was to them that they were involved in that. And I just remember that that was an area, and the area has changed a lot now, but it was well known for Klan activity and an area that you didn't go into. And then I agree with that, Robert. Um, we don't care about the reality. They know and don't care, move on. I would agree with that to a point, but that we also have to operate in spaces with them. And so, not, and I think caring about their reality is not necessarily what we're doing, but when we're having the conversation and having to work within spaces that they control, or spaces that we need to partner with them, the conversations have to happen, and we understand that they don't want to hear the conversation. So it's less care, like it really bothers me that I care what they think, and more of an awareness that they don't. Um, so it's not necessarily caring like your feelings are hurt or something like that, or that you might care what a friend thinks. It's not that same caring. Rosalind, absolutely, Rosalind. They have some seats. This ain't your show. This ain't your show. Um, um, yes, yes, Teresa. That is my experience. Yes, Jewel, avoiding those trucks in our area with the flags on the back of the truck flying. Um, I recognize, living in a rural space, that um, the before I moved my home from the farm, where I was having problems, and the problems that I was having on that farm looked like people coming onto the private property at night, and looking through the buildings, um, and people coming to the property asking me what we were doing on the property. Were we building an ISIS commune? And people driving their trucks through the property. Again, private property, and they would drive their trucks through the property, and they would drive their trucks close to my house. And y'all know I have a bunch of windows, so it was disturbing that this was happening. And that's when I recognized that I needed to leave, because I was out there by myself and I didn't feel safe. But what I've learned since that time is that I find myself tensing up when I hear those trucks, because the trucks are loud. And I know you know what I'm talking about, like the big Ford trucks, and they have the big mufflers, and they're loud. And I find myself tensing up because of my experience with that in the area. So yeah. Michelle is saying when she gets angry and cry, you better look out. She's an outspoken introvert. I've always been told to soften my tone, not doing it. My field is speaking and training. It has cost me a lot. Oh well. Absolutely. Um Casey, Jewel, if you don't mind me asking, are you talking about John? Won't use his last name. I met and spoke to him at length while there. Sad if that was his reaction to your concerns. That's absolutely who I'm speaking about, Casey. Absolutely. Thing, pick it up. That's what I'm talking about. Um, Robert is saying there's tiny home community in San Francisco for the homeless that just looks like plain cabins. I like the fact that you're advocating for luxury from luxury tiny homes. Yes. So for tiny homes for the unhoused, most of the programs that are dealing with the unhoused obviously don't have a lot of money. And so the tiny houses for them are to provide basic shelter. And we know and understand that. Basic shelter, get them on their feet, provide them with services. And so um, some are really like plain cabins. There are a couple of communities. There's a community in Greensboro, the Greensboro, Salem, North Carolina area that are really nicer. But I think those people are going through a process, and maybe that is like the upscale version of getting to home ownership. There are also some in Savannah that I think are nice, but there are some homes that are really really plain for the unhoused. But I think they also don't see them as the long term plan for those people, and so with limited funds and it not being the long term plan, then they're trying to do the best that they can, and that makes sense. Um, the work that I do, my tagline being, "You don't have to give up luxury to go tiny." Is I feel like it's important for our community to see tiny houses as an option for home ownership. And we're not interested in, so most of our community is still chasing the American dream, unfortunately. The dream that's not designed for us. But in America, success looks like a lot in big houses and oftentimes excess. And so to have a conversation about tiny houses with a community that is still chasing um, the American dream or still trying to get to home ownership for the first time, or a community where your grandmother or your great grandmother may still live in a home in a rural area that might be considered a shack where access to utilities wasn't always a thing. So when you have that as your background, trying to talk about a tiny house and not understanding that tiny houses can be luxury is a hard conversation and a hard sell. And so as I was designing my house, I've lived in some really nice spaces. And so for me, thinking about my house as my long-term plan, I knew I didn't want to feel like I was going backward or giving things up. And so that is what went into my design. Um, but it's important for us, if we're looking at tiny houses as the first home, we've not achieved home ownership. We don't want to feel like we're moving into, and I always throw Laura Ingalls under the bus. Laura Ingalls' Little House on the Prairie, where it looks like a struggle and it looks like hard work. That's not anything that's going to be appealing. And so that is absolutely why I advocate for that you don't have to give up luxury. And luxury can look like different things to different people. But it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hardship. It doesn't have to be hard work. It doesn't have to be the struggle as you think about a tiny house. And I think that's an important conversation to have. Um, Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yes, 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 yes. I'm not trying to dissuade us at all. It is about awareness and a roadmap. Absolutely. That is what the important thing. Agree, Judith. Yes, Teresa. Thank you. I don't want to dissuade any of us. I want to show. us how it can be done and help us along the way. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. I agree. Ownership, and that's the hard part, owning stuff. I agree. Um, Land, farms, urban lots, RV parks, etc., is needed too. You have a community here, and the change requires many hearts and hands. MLK left on this note. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm trying to do some work in this space to help our community for sure. Um, is Teresa? Is that law like the law that still exists in South Carolina where a black person cannot it's interesting all of the laws on the books like home there's some laws in some of the northern states that speak to a white person not being able to sell their home to a black person, and the laws were never removed, and they, like you said, they just exist there. They weren't um, they haven't been changed, and it's tiring. And I said it's tiring, and Sharon just said it's tiring, but we must persevere. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, it's tiring being black. We have to do self care and keep pushing. So there was something I read. It's not for me. It's not tiring, and I had to change my perspective because I said the same thing. It's tiring being black. It's not tiring being black for me. I love, love, love being black. It is anti-blackness is tiring, and I think that I know that's what you're saying. But I had to reframe the way I said that because I wanted to be clear. I love being black. It's not tiring being black, but anti-blackness is tiring, and I know that's what you're saying. And we absolutely have to do self-care and keep pushing and protect our joy and protect our happiness and protect our peace because it is often so disturbed just from anti-blackness, and so that's important. I agree, C, with absolutely what you said. It comes back to ownership and responsibility. And Golda was trying to tell me foresight. That was where I was trying to speak to. Y'all be helping me out. I appreciate y'all. And Sharon, it was a sundown town where you needed to be out. That's exactly what sundown towns are. Be out before it gets dark, and they were aware of that and made sure I was out safely. Hi, Sandra. Welcome. You and I need to chat. Um, yes. So, Allison, you're right. There are places that we know that you don't want to be in after dark, and like I said, there's an area back behind my home, where my tiny house is located, and I don't go in that area. Um, yes, 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 yes. Yes, Cumming, Georgia is in Forsyth, and yes, there are. I said that there are Black people who live there, but the area is what the area is, and it is still. And some of those same people that didn't want folks back there still are in that area, and so there's still some safety concerns that we have to have. Um, my friend that I worked with before, who was working as a branch rep, I guess, that traveled to the branches to check to see if they were following guidelines, needed to leave before he would end up missing. It's a real thing. Sundown towns are a real thing. Um, the murder performed yesterday is the new norm here. I started my greeting here by saying I'm in Florida. Yes, Jacksonville is my home, and this shooting was real. I knew it was real. I saw I took the comment for what it is. We do know stuff is happening for real. Um, yes, the unhoused. So I always speak to Charlotte and the fact that we have a large unhoused population, and Charlotte is really focused on big dollar, as you know, Teresa. They're building more and more apartments and things in the area and gentrifying areas that were previously black areas and pushing people out, and they care nothing about the unhoused because they're chasing big dollar. I have tried to have conversations with them around tiny houses since 2015, but that is not on their radar. In the smaller cities that are more focused on the people that they serve are kind of leading the charge in doing something about it. Key is saying when you are being guided by that more powerful, you sit back and watch the process. Your work is worthy and extremely valuable. Everyone here appreciates you and what you're doing. Don't tap out. Thank you, Key. I think y'all also know that I'm emotional, so don't y'all try to make me cry today. Thank you, Key. I appreciate you and your support always. Thank you so much. Um, Are there any areas that you know of that are probably safer or friendlier for us? I'm looking to settle down in a tiny house to retire in. I have a five-year plan. So, um, I feel like urban, and I struggle to even say this because Jacksonville is an urban area. As I say this, urban areas are often safer spaces for us. Thank you, Key. Um, Often, and that definition is changing, but urban areas are often safer spaces. So, urban areas that allow tiny houses are on the West Coast. Several cities in California will allow a tiny house in a backyard there as an ADU. Um, the West Coast kind of is leading the charge for tiny houses in urban areas. Right now, in other areas that allow tiny houses, it is more rural areas. Um, East Coast is more rural areas, and so it is on a case by case basis. I don't have a area that could say that is safer or friendlier. Um, I still, and so I've talked about this, and Teresa has been very instrumental in helping me connect with her cousin is who's connected me with a tool. I'm still working on my partnering with landowners and Black landowners, and tiny house owners for safety for and for those reasons. And but it's gotten to be something more than I can manage, and I am hoping to navigate this tool. I've started the process with putting this into a tool that will it's going to be very valuable once it's launched. And so I'm hoping to have that up and ready within the next couple of months. So that would be something that would be valuable to you in your 5-year plan to connect with property owners that understand and share your concerns, and there's some safety in that. So I unfortunately don't have an answer for that other than urban areas and spaces kind of being more of where we should gravitate to. Okay, so retirement in 10 years, you got a 5-year plan. Yes, I do totally think you started the show on HGTV where they featured luxury tiny, but in the non people of color version. Absolutely. The funny thing, the funny thing about when I was building my tiny house at that time, my counterparts were very, very vocal about the fact that you didn't spend more than X amount of dollars for your tiny house. It wasn't supposed to be too big. It wasn't supposed to be this. It wasn't supposed to be that. And I really was keeping my house under wraps because I knew I was doing everything that they were saying you weren't supposed to do, but it was my house and my money. And so I really didn't care. And then, and I also knew that my house was going to appeal to us, and I knew my house was going to appeal to women who wanted a closet and who wanted nice bathroom space and who wanted the aesthetics. And so I built my house, and I kind of feel the same way, Teresa. So thank you. I feel like luxury was something that wasn't being talked about. And then I built my house, I feel like the game started changing because then people, and the conversation had to be had even within the movement to say, with a movement, it's changing, it's always evolving. And so you don't get to say how this movement has to remain, that the house can't be this big or you can't spend this much money. That's what a movement is about. People will take it and accept it and make it their own. And so they had a lot of rules about what tiny houses were supposed to be, and I was trying to break all of them because this was my house. So anyway, yes, Michelle, I knew that's exactly what you meant. It's the anti-blackness that is the thing that is tiring. So I already knew that. Um, Robert is asking, would the term tiny home still include a stationary tiny home with a basement, and does that change any state occupying land laws? So tiny home, the tiny home term is relative to um, square footage, and so the thoughts around tiny homes is that it's going to be between depending on who you're talking to, 400 to 500 square feet. More people, some people lean more towards 400. My house is 470-ish square feet, so I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. But that's what's going to define a tiny home. So if you can figure out a tiny home within that square footage that includes a basement, then it's still a tiny house. If it's larger than that, then it's not going to fall within that term. And whether you can build it on foundation is going to depend on that city or county, whether they have any rules around minimum square footage. That's what's going to determine what you can build, and what their occupancy laws are. And that is determined by each city and county. It's not at the state level, it is city and county. So tiny homes can be on foundation, yes. And they can, depending on the rules in that area, they can be considered as an ADU, like the conversations we've had around ADUs, in the backyard of a home, or if the city or county allows it on as a single family dwelling on a foundation on a piece of property by itself, it's still going to be a tiny house if it does not exceed the square footage that defines it. Judith, have a great weekend. Um, Please keep this platform the same way. You don't realize how many people need this to encourage us to start our own tiny house journey. Okay. All right. I will. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Thank you. Um, Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes, I knew what you meant. Winter's Blue speaks about safe areas to stay and travel to. Absolutely. This is a niche. Tiny house developers in cities especially make more when people are stacked. But even in the city, some of us like feeling the earth without elevators to get to it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Winter is blue. Thank you. Note I just made. Thank you very much. And Clyde, you're very welcome. All right. Let's see. It is 1 o'clock. We've been here for an hour. Mental illness and evil are two different things, Robert is saying. I wish people would stop thinking that all mass shootings are a mental illness problem. I think the thing that happens there is strategic, in that depending on the shooter, is when they want to assign the term mental illness instead of addressing the evil intent. And so they want to humanize some shooters, and you'll see that oftentimes where they try to go back into their past, and they were abused and they were this and they were that, versus calling out, no, they were racist and they did these things because they were racist. It's the same thing that we know um, when they're calling little black boys men at young ages, like Tamir Rice, when they didn't allow him to be a little boy, as they almost victim blame him for what happened to him. It is strategic. The media purposely does that, to provide sympathy for specific colors, and then we don't receive um, that same in return. So it's not. We know it's not mental illness; it's evil, but that is also by design. Um, there's a new tiny house video up on YouTube. Casey, I need to see who you're talking about. Owner is also a person of color, Asian male. He lives in a tiny home community in California. Tree is a, I don't think you're talking about Tree. Tree's home is in DC. I need to figure out who you're talking about. Um, but if you have a name, drop it and I'll look into it. Key is saying, Jewel, you were and are still able to see beyond the limited vision that was placed on tiny home occupancy and who the occupants were to be. You have opened our eyes and opportunities. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Teresa. Oh yeah. Teresa is speaking to Rachel's comment, that type of experience. Absolutely. Touching the ground. I agree with that. That's some important for some of us. Like everybody should have an opportunity to experience what is important to them in home ownership. So I appreciate that. This has been a very engaged conversation. There are apparently 108 comments here. And I will say again, I came into this not having a specific topic to speak to. So I appreciate the engagement that you all have provided and keeping this conversation going. And as I always say, I appreciate your support in what I do. And I appreciate it. So I did see Southern California as an area that I have to visit. Somehow I guess I need to put up a poll to figure out areas where I need to visit. Um, I've got my notes of the things that I said I would add to the video comments. Thank you for the recommendation of people I need to reach out that you all would like to have on the show. I am always interested in guests that you all have that you'd like to see that I would do well to reach out to. So thank you. Um, Thank you, Key. Thank you, thank you. Rachel, I hope you have a great day too. Robert, good to see you again. Thanks for participating in the conversation. Virtually see you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you so much. And you all keep me going. And I appreciate that with the work that I feel is important. And um, oh, Michelle is in North Carolina too. Okay. All right. So Michelle, Michelle, what city are you in? And I would probably do Charlotte. So let me know if you travel to Charlotte if you're not in Charlotte. Thank you, Clyde. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you all too. I appreciate you all so much more than you know. Um, yes, Robert, my daughter and I are now the same age. I'm going to tell her that she's not going to appreciate it at all. Um, Thank you, Casey. I thank you dropping. Uh, yes, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna do my closeout. I appreciate you all more than you know. Um, Thank you. I'm not gonna say it too much because y'all not getting ready to make me cry today. Reidsville, North Carolina. Okay, all right. So maybe my first event is here in North Carolina, and then I go from there. Thank you, Allison. Thank you. Y'all not gonna get me today. I am not gonna cry. I am not gonna cry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you all. Y'all are trying to get me. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Um, yes, Michelle. Yeah, I remember that. So all right, I'll start in North Carolina and we'll go from there for an event. I have I already know the space here. So um, thank you, Carla. Thank you. I'm glad you all are here, and I'm glad you find value in this. And I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the love and the support. All right, y'all got me this morning, but I'm not doing it. Thank you, Teresa. Absolutely, Robert. That's all I know to do. That's all I know to do. That's what I'm here for. So thank you. All right, y'all got me. Share my screen to close out. Thank you. Um, all right, y'all got me. Thank you again. Um, I so appreciate you all for showing up on Sundays. I appreciate your love. It's needed more than you know. So thank you. This has been What's Your Question? In the segment next week. Hopefully, I'll be back with a conversation. I got to find a guest, but I hope to be back in conversation with a guest and sharing that with you all here. This is the Creating Home a Tiny House series. Y'all got me all jacked up. Um, if you find this video helpful, I hope you'll like it. You'll share it. Tell a friend about it. Um, I'm a crybaby, Allison. I'm sorry. I am a crybaby. I'm a cry if I'm mad, angry, sad, all of the things. I'm trying real hard. Um, Thank you, Allison. That is important. Um, Subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends about it. I'm always trying to grow this channel, so thank you for your help in growing the channel. Teresa, thank you. See you next week. Um, and turn on the notifications so you'll know when content is available. And we will chat next Sunday. Everybody have a great week, a safe week, and thank you so much. Take care. Thank you, Carla.